My name is Van Myler, and I'm the Vice President of Client Strategy for Vision 40 Media. And I'm with Dr. Steve Peterson, who serves as a Vice President of Houston Baptist University Online, and Dr. Jay Spencer, who's Associate Vice President at Houston Baptist University Online. So we're going to talk about a couple topics today: what makes a successful distance learning program, and also some of the issues facing universities and educators today. So over the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen hundreds of schools launching distance learning programs for the first time, but we've also seen the closing of many for-profit distance learning schools like ITT and Corinthian College, and most recently EDMC and the Art Institutes. So here's a quote from Inside Education, December 2018. Education Management Corporation, despite a recognizable brand, struggled with decreases in enrollment and revenue and increased scrutiny by state and federal investigators before selling the properties last year to Dream Center Foundation. The Dream Center purchased Argosy University, the Art Institute, South University, and Western State College of Law, which together had more than 100 campuses, from EDMC, and converted the large for-profit institutes into nonprofit entities. The campuses total had 50,000 students. So even though these schools built a brand and invested heavily in marketing and recruited, why did they fail? Why did these schools fail? Why are for-profit schools failing?
Well, not to be controversial, but I think part of it is you go back almost 10 years now, and they were scrutinized by our own government as and put under some regulations or some measurements that might not have been fair. If you remember in the congressional hearings, they were scrutinizing graduation rates from those schools. And so that became the story on the leading news about people starting to understand what the difference was between for-profit and nonprofit. But the secret, or the dirty secret, of higher ed is really only 45 to 50% of incoming freshmen will graduate in a 6-year cohort, right, across the United States. So they kind of put the for-profits under a microscope. So I think that was the beginning of some of the decline. I think to describe just one thing that either one of those organizations did, I think it's a multiple of things. In Corinthians' case, I think they got over leveraged, and as soon as there was some holdup of the release of their federal funds, they couldn't continue to operate. But I wouldn't criticize that sector too much, because I think they did a lot of good for online education. They spent millions of dollars in course development and really led the way. I think of schools like University of Phoenix. If you look at their financials, spend tens of millions of dollars just on course development and a quality online experience. So I think that started it, and then it became a series of things that led to their ultimate demise.
So what do you think is a major difference between nonprofit and for-profit universities?
Well, at its core, the nonprofit exists to reinvest any surplus. In fact, in a nonprofit environment, you don't even call it profit. It's budget surplus, and that money is supposed to then be reinvested towards the mission of the organization. Whether it's a nonprofit charity or an educational institution, they're supposed to put those funds back into the betterment of the organization. For profit, they're generating profit for shareholders and private equity firms, and so there is a little bit more of a focus on generating that profit.
And it probably caused some of the issues from the government side, on the for-profit side, because they did have a shareholder they were beholden to, so they they operated much more like a business, to probably to the extreme in some of their marketing practices and those types of things. So I think that's coming back. I think they're kind of scaling that back. But the successful nonprofits actually adopt some of those for-profit practices to be more successful in what they're doing. And the nonprofits that run more like a business are more successful than being just having an online program as a nonprofit. The nonprofits kind of started in that direction back, if you remember, the MOOCs. The massive online, programs. And a lot of that was because I think part of that was to try to attract some of the consumer audience that would go into for-profits. And there was pressure from nonprofits boards to be more profitable, so to speak. And so they kept talking about, why aren't we in online? Why aren't we online? So they developed the MOOCs so they could say they were online, but they weren't really online. So the ones that have adopted the online practices and programs like the for-profits have done are more successful, like the GCUs and the Liberties and the SNHUs and Arizona State. Those bigger ones operate more like what a for-profit would operate like.
So as he, go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was just going to comment, you made me think, some of the declining enrollments in the for-profit really started to take place after the point you just made, which is nonprofits entering into the market. And you see from research from online learners that more and more of them are attending a university within 50 or 100-mile radius of where they live. Yeah. So early on, it was the for-profits that came into the space, and so students didn't have a choice to go to the school in their backyard because they didn't offer that program. Mm-hmm. But then as nonprofits and most universities, as you just quoted, developed online programs, the choice now became either a national brand, which tended to be a for-profit, 10 years ago or more, or the school that I'm familiar with, 20 miles from where I live. And so I think that also contributed to some of the enrollment decline for some of those for-profit national brands. But
I think something, in addition to that, in the EDMC model, and even University of Phoenix to some extent as well, would have footprints, all over, where they were, even if it was a building that they just paid to have their name on, and it gave the appearance that they were, localized to some degree. But they may also have classes. I know EDMC and South and some of the others actually had physical classes in addition to online. And we've seen some of that in some of the nonprofits that adopted that model and started to have local areas where they would teach classes in addition to online. And they're even reining those back, shutting down those sites and going completely online, because the consumer, if they want to go online, they want to go online. They don't want to go to this particular facility at this time and date or whatever. So I think that's part of what EDMC's problem was too, is they still had a lot of that hybrid type of model and weren't purely completely online.
And Jay and I are serving at Houston Baptist University. We're right there in the heart of Houston, which is a major metropolitan area, but we have a 100-acre campus where we have Division I sports, 16 Division I athletics. And so if you're an online student, you don't have to, we joke, fight the Houston traffic to come to class on campus. You can do that online. But if you want to come on Thursday night to our basketball game, or come on Saturday to our football game or our ladies softball, that's there for you. You can come to the library and
so
participate.
They have all the resources as a residential student.
Exactly.
Online, which is
exactly.
great.
So it's a campus-based online program, and you're starting to see more of that.
So as we're seeing all these students being displaced by for-profits that are failing, does that create an opportunity for Houston Baptist University Online or other schools out there? Because we've seen so many schools, for-profit schools, fail. So there's probably hundreds of thousands of students that are saying, what do I do now? I'm in year 2. I just started, my school just closed. What do I do?
It is unfortunate because if you define it as a market, the adult learner, they're already someone who had a false start. And we just said, I think it's 40% of those who start school on average actually finish with a degree. So we have millions of people in the United States that have started university at some point and now need to return. And in the online adult learner market, some of those have had 2 or 3 false starts. So they've now put their trust in one of these institutions that have fallen by the wayside, and now they have to go through the process again. And so it is an opportunity, but it's also, you need to be prepared with the academic advising and the transfer credit policies to allow these students to get to their goal, which is to complete their degree ultimately.
Sure.